Scott Robertson, 7 Super Rugby titles. I know our mate Borchi says it's only 5, but he's played in 7 and he's won 7. 2 of them domestically in Australia and New Zealand during COVID. He still maintains 2017 was the most spectacular one because without 2017 in Johannesburg, he saes, there wouldn't be 7.
Is that the one with the red card?
That's the one when Kwagga gave it to them. Kwagga was man of the match.
Who was the man of the match in this last one?
Ben O'Keefe.
Exactly.
No, look, they certainly got the rub of the green, but to go to the mighty Waikato and take out an informed Chiefs side with 25,000 lunatics ringing those bells, it takes some doing. But it did need 15 on 14. The interesting stat from that game, when they were 15 on 15, the Chiefs won the game 17-3.
Really?
Yeah, so 22 of the points are scored, while the 3 yellow cards. Anton Leonard-Brown should have been a straight red according to the rules, but they also have a system where the referee just gives the yellow and the TMO has got to upgrade, give the TMO more powers. So, but if that had been South African, he'd be out of the game for about 12 months. He would have been quacked straight away. Yeah. So, I haven't watched that much of Super Rugby. I wrote a piece in the Sunday Times that you guys lovingly put on SARugbymag.co.za.
Quality stuff.
I was really impressed by the quality of the game in terms of the intensity and the physicality. It wasn't one of these 32-28 barbarian type matches. They really went hell for leather and gave it to each other.
Yeah, I enjoyed that part of it too. It definitely wasn't the basketball that I feel like has been prevalent in Super Rugby since the South African teams pulled out. It was great to see the guys get stuck in and there was some tackling, which made a difference. And you mentioned it off air. We spoke about Scotty Barrett really sort of stepping up and playing well. As we spoke about last week, we love Scotty Barrett. Thought Sam Whitelock was outstanding, one of our favourite locks. So that was a good spectacle. Aside from the referee influence, I thought it was a great game.
Well, I mean, the beauty of sport is last Thursday we wrote Sam Whitelock off. We retired him basically.
In 2015.
And you know, Saturday he came out and played 81 minutes. He hadn't played for 2 weeks. He had missed the semi-final because of an Achilles. And so he didn't miss it because of a niggle in his knee, an Achilles at that age. For him to come out and put in that kind of performance, and you look at Cody Taylor, he played 81 minutes. Brady Retallick, they played 81 minutes, which again shows you this formulaic 60 Yanker guy. If a guy's there and he's contributing, keep him there for 80 minutes.
Yeah. Agreed. But, you know, if they can play like that in the final and produce the spectacle they did, what would they do to those Wallabies sides if they played like that every week? I mean, they're thrashing those guys at a canter.
Yeah, and I think that's what they do miss South Africa in Super Rugby and Argentina, the Jaguares, because they don't get that physical commitment from when they play the Aussie sides. They get it in 2 or 3 of their own local derbies, and then they really smash the shit out of each other. The Chiefs had won both league games, home and away against the Crusaders. I just thought there were 16 of the 30 were in the current All Blacks squad. Again, disclaimer, Fozzie's coaching them, okay? So, but I think with a guy like Ryan coaching the forwards, Joe Smith having a far more hands-on role, I think you're going to see a far more improved New Zealand side over the course of the season. You know, one never knows how they're going to experiment with, but Jesus, I'll tell you, those Chiefs back 3 have got some serious gas.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Stevenson, how he isn't in the mix, I don't know. That guy is in incredible form at the moment. And there's a couple of guys in that Chiefs lineup who will feel like they should be involved. I thought Luke Jacobson had a good game. We spoke about that.
Yeah, again, I mean, we wrote him off on Thursday, retired him as well. And he put in some big hits.
But I think the point is you can never really write off the All Blacks. Anybody who says, oh, the All Blacks, you know, we said they're not favourites to win this World Cup, but you've got to think they are contenders. We'd be surprised to see them go home anywhere before the quarterfinals or the semi-finals. You know, we expect them to make the playoffs and to feature in those playoffs. So we expect them to be strong. They will be better, like you've mentioned. Fozzie can't be that terrible 2 years in a row. And they've got lots of stock, man, in terms of the backs and the decision makers. Any team with Richie McCaw, with the X factor of Beauden Barrett, you've got to think they're going to be around come the knockout stage.
Have you brought Richie McCaw back again?
I mean, not Richie McCaw, sorry. Did I say Richie McCaw?
Yes,
I
you
mean
said
Bowden
Richie.
Barrett. I don't know why, because we were talking about him before.
Were you thinking Richie Mahanga?
No, I said, I mean Richie Mahanga and Bowden Barrett. Did I say Richie McCaw and Bowden Barrett?
Yeah,
Oh,
so,
wow.
well, you bought it here, you just heard it first. Zels just bought Richie McCaw out of retirement.
And I thought Richie Mahanga was amazing. He was really, really good in that game. And as I've said, Bowden, the X factor there is...
Well, Sonny Bill Williams says Richie Mahanga and Sam Whitelock, the best two players ever produced by the Crusader franchise. Scott Robinson labelled Mahanga as the best to ever come out. I don't know, just maybe they forgot about a bloke called Dan Carter. He wasn't too shabby.
And the guy I mentioned.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the mighty Macau. So a lot of kind of annoyance in New Zealand, though, that the Crusaders won. So they can't stand those guys up north.
But I also think it was the way that game played out. Like, if you take a little bit more of a helicopter view of this thing, that Crusaders team is packed with the guys going to the World Cup. They're coached by the guys who are taking over the All Blacks next year. The last thing that New Zealand rugby wants is Razor to go out with the loss, Sam Whitelock to go out with the loss, and the guys who are going to the World Cup to go out with the loss. So I don't think the Crusaders were ever going to lose that final.
Well, they really battled to win it then, didn't they? Hey?
Yeah,
they took it down to the 81st minute.
Exactly.
So all the raving about them, maybe we should just reel it in a bit.
Yeah.
But no, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the finals. One of the better ones I've seen. If you look at the finals this year as well, you look at the URC final decided in the 77th minute.
Yeah.
Stormers could still have won it. 19-14. They had the penalty advantage. You look at top 14 final, 79th minute. Intermac breaks and wins it for Toulouse. You look at the Heineken Cup final, last few minutes, great comeback from La Rochelle. So all the finals. Went right down to the wire. Can't say the same about the Currie Cup. There was always going to be a breeze for the Cheetahs and Rumpin. I got his 10 points, 39. He got the Currie Cup, their seventh one. And for those who believe in numbers and believe in finding something in the stars, just know that in 2007 the Cheetahs won the Currie Cup. They beat the Lions. In 2019 the Cheetahs won the Currie Cup. They beat the Lions. 2023 they won the Currie Cup. They beat another kind of cat, the Pumas, which means the Boks are going to win the World Cup.
I would love to believe that's true. That'd be amazing. Look, I think maybe the Lions were the key factor there. The Lions losing in the Currie Cup, not so much the Cheetahs winning.
So congratulations to everyone in Bloom. It looked like a fantastic atmosphere, fantastic occasion. And Cheetahs deserved winners. They've been the best team throughout the season.
Yeah.
But also, let's put it into perspective, that's not URC rugby.
No.
And it's not Champions Cup rugby. It is very much second-tier rugby. And develop that competition as a second-tier competition, play the youngsters, and I think the lessons that all four our franchises learned this season is let the Currie Cup operate on its own. Use it for a player to come back from injury if you need some game time, but don't try and play players in the Currie Cup, in the URC, and with the addition of a Champions or Challenge Cup game time. I mean, it's just, what do we say? A guy like Ulrich Lowe for the Bulls, he played nearly every game this season.
10,000 minutes of rugby.
And he's finished. I mean, he's out of the Boks squad at the moment at 22 because he's just been played into the ground. So player management, refocus the Currie Cup. Let's accept it is what traditionally was the Vodacom Cup. And we've got some great youngsters coming through. Play them there with the sprinkling of veterans who are no longer good enough in the URC. But our focus has to be URC and then trying to make headway in the Champions Cup.
I mean, maybe there could be some sort of an exemption for the URC franchises from the salary cap. Maybe players under a certain age don't count towards the salary cap, so they could stock up for a bigger second squad that could compete in the Currie Cup. Junior players, maybe that would help a bit. I don't know, but like you say, we can't be trying to get the URC players to also play the Currie Cup, the Champions Cup, and it's just too much.
Yeah, and if you look at the squads, and we spoke about that late last week, our squads aren't strong enough in the URC to win both, or even to really be competitive in the playoffs of the Champions Cup. Forget the Challenge Cup now.
Spot on.
But they're strong enough to make a point and a statement in the URC.
Yes.
Where if you look at, especially Leinster, we've been a prime example of a squad that has been built over a decade. But your top French teams, they've got so much depth in terms of international players that they've imported from New Zealand or from South Africa, from Australia, and then from every island that they could find.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily always where you say, oh, it's a French club side. It's not. It's an international club side. So I would say we're probably 2 seasons off, getting that depth, luring players back. And I also hope that as the game develops, we'll see some of those big-name international players wanting to play for South African franchises in the URC and then the Champions Cup.
Yeah, I agreed 100%. I think the one thing we'll never get around is what we had in Super Rugby, which is that the majority of the teams in the competition are based a long way away from South Africa. So the travel factor always counts against you in that sort of environment. In a way, you're actually in more depth than those other guys because you have to factor in that the fatigue of flying halfway around the world.
But also the Super Rugby, you'd fly in for a month, and so you basically fly and you'd be there for a month.
Yes.
2 games in New Zealand, 2 games in Australia. I mean, the Sharks went to Europe 8 times over a period of 4 or 5 months.
It was like the terminal.
Yeah, so it was just, I think people underestimated that kind of travel, thinking, oh, it's not a 18-hour flight to New Zealand. There's no 10-hour time difference. But what they didn't factor in was that they were flying via Doha because of barter deals that have been done to try and kind of minimize costs. While South Africa is paying to play in this competition, they only become fully fledged members, I think, in 2025, and then they benefit from that broadcasting deal. But yeah, a wonderful end to the domestic season. With the Cheetahs in New Zealand, a good end. Focus now fully internationals. We've got the Under-20 World Cup that started at the weekend.
Yeah.
And then a week from now, we've got the start of the Rugby Championship. Pretoria, it's going to be Australia against South Africa. And New Zealand, Mount Smart, home of the Warriors. It's going to be the All Blacks in Auckland against the Springboks. Already Rassie Erasmus has said they're going to send 2 teams. One team's going to go ahead, as they did in 2019.
Yes.
They had success against Australia here, playing with a very different team that played in New Zealand. So, and they got that 16-all draw in Wellington as well. So I don't think it diminishes the effectiveness of South Africa that much, because you put the 2 packs against each other. You could pick 2 South African packs and you would know who the winner is.
Easily.
I would say there is a definite A-side backline and a B-side backline.
Correct.
But the
Mix and match up front. Easy.
yeah, the 8 that you send over to New Zealand, or the 8 that stays behind, is going to be a hell of a competitor.
What do you think the imperatives are for the Springboks in this Rugby Championship? I mean, the starting combinations are pretty settled, so what do you think they're trying to get out of this? How much smoke and mirrors can we expect from the Boks in terms of the way they play and what they show other teams?
Yeah, I think they'll want to make a statement against Australia at home, win that one. It also then casts a bit of doubt into Eddie's mind. New Zealand, they'll give it a bash, but there's a good chance they won't win that one. And then they'll look to tie up the Pumas, as they always do. And then hope that somewhere along the line, Australia and New Zealand cancel each other out, and they kind of somehow pox a tournament. I still don't know why they play that tournament in terms of a structured league when you play 3 games instead of 6. And it's also very weighted on where you play your 3 games.
Obviously.
So I would rather that they just kind of not had the Rugby Championship this year and just played organised friendlies.
Yeah.
And again, you know, playing the All Blacks in Auckland, playing them at Twickenham, with the potential of playing them in a quarter-final, how much are we really going to show?
Exactly.
We're going to be physical and competitive, but we're not going to show our A hand. We're not necessarily going to play our first team, because you don't want to give guys 2 cracks at you before the World Cup.
Correct.
So it's going to be an interesting player management, I think, month. But the results are also important. You lose 3 games in the Rugby Championship, and all of a sudden people say, hey, you know, winning becomes a habit. You take confidence from it. But it's
a fine line, though, because we love to be the underdogs, obviously.
We do, and I think we'll play in a way that kind of makes the world think we are the underdogs.
Yes.
We never get mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, Graham Henry is talking about how scary France is. He's talking about how good England are. He says how excellent Ireland are and how dangerous Australia are, but he hasn't mentioned South Africa. You know, I think the guy's still, you know, from the several beatings he got over here.
It may be a bit of a race to the bottom this year in the Rugby Championship, that match at Twickenham, where guys are just actually not wanting to show anything, and everybody's trying to save something for the... It's a balance between having some winning momentum, but also, if the Springboks beat the All Blacks 55-3 at Twickenham, that's the worst thing that can happen for South Africa.
Well, I mean, you go back to 2003. John Mitchell's All Blacks put 52 points past us in Pretoria, 52-16. I was with the Springboks that day, one of the worst days. We had a terrible build-up. We were flown in from Durban on the Friday, having had a full-on series of trial matches, where he picked the starting 50 to Rudolf Stroili, then flew in 30 players to play a trial match against the Sharks behind closed doors. Only confirmed his reserves on the Friday afternoon. They'd been playing in this 60-minute matches, 4 chukkers of 15 each, against the Sharks, basically Super Rugby side. And then we flew up to Johannesburg. Instead of going to the Monte Casino, we were taken into the wilds to some resort, if you can call it a resort, in Pretoria. And the guys couldn't fit on the beds. There was no food. Their clothes were at the Monte Casino.
Straight out of the coaching textbook.
Yeah, and Rudolph's idea was to take them out of their comfort zones, as he said the All Blacks would the next day. And they were just never at the races, and we took 52-16. And then John Mitchell took his All Blacks to Sydney, where they put 50 points past Eddie Jones's Australians. And everyone was like, why? The rest of the world, bar England, doesn't have to bother pitching for the World Cup. And somehow they got to the final. They got to the semi-final. They played New Zealand, and they beat them 20-10. And Eddie knew all he had to do is make your tackles, because they weren't going to beat them on skill. They just had to beat them defensively. But New Zealand had played every move that they had in their playbook in those 2 matches. So timing is everything, and no one remembers who wins the Rugby Championship in World Cup year.
Yeah.
No one remembers who comes second in World Cup year.
Yeah.
And there can only be one winner. So when people always say there's a 4-year cycle and they put all their
eggs in the World Cup basket.
Yeah, you know, well, you've got you're one of 20 teams that can win it. Realistically, maybe one of 8 teams. So what happens before that can't be deemed irrelevant. But it's going to be a very interesting 2 months. And then there's that injury factor of, do you really want to go to the World Cup? Yeah, so how much do you put your body on the line in the Rugby Championship? How much do you put your body on the line in those friendly matches when you know you are cert to go to the World Cup?
And isn't that the time when you get injured? When you're going into contact at anything less than 100%, those are the times when you end up coming off second best.
Yeah, and Eddie says that they're going hell for leather to win it all. Smash and grab. Bledisloe, Rugby Championship and the World Cup. But you've also got players who are coming. These Crusaders have just peaked in a season to win the Super Rugby thing. They now have a week off, and now they join the All Black side. Where's their peak? There is no peak in the Rugby Championship. It's basically, it's restarting that whole process to get them in prime condition for the World Cup.
Yeah.
You can't expect players to peak 3-4 times in a season. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's going to be a hell of an interesting 2 months. We've still got a good 2-3 weeks to go with the Under-20 World Cup in Cape Town.
Yes.
Your thoughts on the first weekend? I was most impressed with Georgia, big bastards from Slibisi, and thought that haka from the Under-20, the All Blacks, was just an amazing bit of theatre, but no wonder they had nothing left for 40 minutes after that.
Yeah, I think the 3 weeks they went into prepping that synchronised dance could possibly have been spent on having a first half plan, because Wales just blew them away in that first half. They had to come back to win it. They did, which was great.
19-5 down, they won at 27-26. Wales probably thinking, how?
Yeah.
How did we lose that game?
Wales probably can't remember anything after watching that 2-minute hug. I mean, there has to be a moratorium on how long can that show go on? Can they spend 30 minutes doing that thing?
Yeah, possibly, because the opening whistle hasn't gone yet.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen, I don't see them progressing much further beyond. I don't see them playing in a final. Okay, I think France were dominant, but also look who they played against.
Correct.
It really looked like men against boys there, just in terms of sheer physicality.
Yeah.
What was it, 75-12 to the French? And then I think South Africa will be there and thereabouts. They are the home team. They got that first one out the way. And
Franco Smith's kid was kicking fantastically.
Yeah, and let's put it into perspective that England and Ireland drew, but England got beaten by Georgia 2 weeks ago. So I think France is the best that's coming out of the north, and I think what's coming out of the south is we're the best. The Puma's not a bad side.
That's what I was going to say. I'm quite keen to see us go against Argentina and see what happens.
You know, I mean, they comfortably beat Italy 43-15, but nice to see the game well supported. The rain abated slightly for the weekend. It was also lovely to see the games being played out at like an institution like Paul Gymnasium and out in Stellenbosch. Smaller venues just creates a great atmosphere. Atmosphere.
I couldn't agree more.
So what's on the menu for this week?
Well, they're back on Thursday. They're playing Italy, like we've spoken about. That'll be interesting to see. I'm quite keen to see what adjustments they make there, because there were some question marks about the performance of some of the players in that team. But I think everybody's keeping an eye on the Under-20 Championship, looking very much forward to the start of the rugby.
Yeah, so I mean, it all really kicks off in the next fortnight.
Yes.
The 8th of July, when it all happens. And geez, I just can't wait for Eddie to get here. I can't wait for Eddie to get here and to start talking to the South Africans.
Me neither.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw he said he was going to stick to his 33-man squad. He chose 34, but apparently chose about 79 because he's put players on rehab, put players on utility, put players on standby. I think the only player he's missed is the Brumbies fly-off, who made his test debut at 20. He's been retired at 21. And we haven't even retired him. You know, normally we retire everyone and send them to France. But it's going to be fun to see what kind of match 23s he comes up with. But their stocks are limited as well, in a sense that when you still got to go back to James Slipper and Mike Hooper as your co-captains. Both have had issues in the past. Hooper left Argentina last year, saying he just had enough, he needed a break, struggling with some mental health issues. James Slipper, substance abuse issues, took himself out the game. No dash to the white line for him. But they're back, and I mean, if that's your leadership group, maybe Eddie gets the best out of them, but I thought something fresher would come out of that when he walked in.
Yeah.
That he would make a typical Eddie from left field choice.
Mate, he's still got time. I mean, this is early days. This is phase one of the Smoke and Mirrors show. So.
Yeah, you also kept on telling me Dave Rennie was going to do it.
That is true.
And I waited, and what did he win? 37% of his games.
What he did was he ushered in the Eddie Jones era, which is genius. That's how Australia's going to win the world. You actually got to credit Dave Rennie for Eddie Jones coming in.
What he did do was knock us over quite a few times.
Yeah, that right.
I mean, we seem to be the easiest game.
Yeah.
Especially there.
Yeah.
But
what I want to see is Richie Arnold and Will Skelton back in the Wallaby setup. They've been bossing people around in the fields of France. Can they do that against teams like South Africa? I want to see how Will Skelton... I mean, Will Skelton, there was a lot of hype about him when he first came into the league. And, you know, he's a big unit. He looks impressive, but he didn't exactly dominate against South African opponents.
Never. And he wasn't even that dominant when he was in England. Okay?
Yeah.
It's been, since he's been at La Rochelle, he seems to have really grown something extra there.
Yeah.
And Arnold was never really in the mix. He's gone there and done brilliantly.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. They've already spoken a big game to say they're not coming here to play basketball. They need mongrel. Their forwards coach has said that they've got the game. They've got the players to beat up South Africa physically.
Beautiful.
And that would be great. I've never seen a Wallabies team beat up South Africa physically. I've seen them disrupt us technically, but not physically. So, yeah, it's going to be a cracker. It's going to be a cracker. Overall impressions though of the under-20s. Who do you see winning it?
Yeah, I think like you said, France is a good bet. South Africa have got we've got the forwards. John Smith banging them over from everywhere on the field is puts South Africa in a great position. We can punish you for penalties. So I think South Africa has to be in the mix. And I expect England. I know you said that they struggled against Georgia, but I expect England to bounce back after that draw against Ireland. So I wouldn't rule them out just yet.
All right, and don't write the All Blacks off, says Zels, eh?
Obviously not, ever.
And that was a conspiracy.
Which one are you talking about? The All Blacks or the junior Kiwis?
Huh? The All Blacks.
No. Come on.
You have a point there. They couldn't send that team into international rugby on the back.
Keith was never ever going to let the Chiefs win that game. Huh? Come on!
I know, Sam Cane was livid, eh? Clayton McMillan was livid. But
when he held back on that obvious red for Anton Leonard-Brown, he was setting up the rest of the game.
Yeah, he couldn't be blamed for anything. But respect to the Kiwis. Lots of intrigue coming out of the Australian camp, and follow the junior Boks, follow them at SARugbymag magazine. There'll be live reporting. Thursday they play again, and obviously on the weekend as well, next Tuesday. And then get prepared for the 8th of July. We're going to still do a lot of talking about the Boks, the All Blacks, the Wallabies, and let's not forget there's a fourth team that plays in that competition. It's called Los Pumas. We'll also talk about them.